Thank you, members. Thank you, members. Before we move on to the next item of business, I would invite members to join me in welcoming to the gallery His Excellency Nuno Brito, the Ambassador of Portugal to the United Kingdom. Thank you. The next item of business is a debate on motion 19632 in the name of Mark Ruskell on better bus services. I would invite those members who would wish to speak in the debate to please press the request to speak buttons, and I call on Mark Ruskell to speak to and to move the motion. Up to 7 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. Scottish Green MSPs believe that everyone in Scotland deserves to benefit from affordable, accessible and reliable transport, including from their local bus services. Having access to better buses has huge positive impacts on people's lives, from helping everyone access education and work opportunities, being connected to vital and local and national services, and of course to each other. And it also plays a role in addressing the climate crisis, encouraging us all to leave the car at home and cut climate pollution. But people across Scotland are still struggling with the affordability and the accessibility of public transport, especially buses. The cost of bus travel has risen by over 60% over the last decade, faster than the rate of wages and the cost of living. And these fare increases are putting significant financial strain on families across Scotland and disproportionately impact people on low incomes, women and minority ethnic communities, as they are more likely to rely on the bus. But it doesn't have to be this way, and the Scottish Greens have continuously fought to make public transport more affordable, accessible and reliable, including delivering free bus travel to all under-22s in Scotland from January 2022, working constructively with this government over successive budget deals. And now, 3 years on, we can see just how successful that scheme has been. Since its rollout, there have been more than 250 million journeys made, and there are over 800,000 card holders as of this June, and I actually live with 2 of them at home. In my own region, the scheme has been taken up by just over 100,000 young people, resulting in some 26.5 million journeys. I'll take a very brief intervention, Mr Hoy.
Does the member share the concerns of my constituents in South Scotland, particularly young people who may have a free bus pass but don't have a bus service to ride on?
Mark Ruskell.
Absolutely, and that's the point of this debate, is to look to the future and look to that vision that we all want to create. Success isn't just about the number of journeys taken, it's in the way it has removed travel barriers for young people and encouraged wider bus usage for them and their families. And it's clear that attitudes are changing. Recent data from the Walking, Wheeling Cycling Trust shows that 67% of young people are supportive and they want to see more public transport. It's in the thousands of pounds that young people and their families have saved, which has been crucial in a time of ever-stretching household budgets. It's in the way it has allowed young people to find new opportunities, be it work, education or social. In the one-year evaluation of the scheme, it was found that a third of young people utilising the concession scheme were able to access new opportunities and new activities. And ultimately, that's good for the economy. I want to see young people getting the best possible start in life, good careers, prosperity, wealth that can then be reinvested back into the public services to pay for the services that gave them a helping hand in the first place. Let's dare to invest in that future for more young people. In every way, the Under-22 scheme has and continues to achieve what it intended to do. And we must ensure that its success continues, which includes addressing some of the key issues that young people and their families have highlighted. Now, issues of reliability, frequency and accessibility, which have been some of the most common reasons why young people, especially in rural areas, have not yet had the full benefits of the scheme. So I agree with Mr Hoy. The scheme is great if you can use it, but if there's no buses near you, or the timetable isn't great, or the buses just don't show up, then it's going to have very little impact on a young person's life. And then as soon as a young person turns 22, they hit a cliff edge, and overnight they're suddenly forced to pay full fares. Now, a young person commuting into Glasgow for their new job faces a £40 a week travel bill. Another young person travelling into Edinburgh from Dunfermline to colleges overnight when they turn 22 faced with a £35 a week travel bill. But the circumstances of these young people's lives don't change overnight, and the affordability crisis doesn't stop when they reach 22 or is paused until a later date. We know that people in their 20s are far more likely to be living and struggling with soaring costs of living. That adults under the age of 25 are more likely to be living in poverty than older adults, and 37% of 16 to 25-year-olds were in relative poverty after housing costs last year. Young people are also more likely to be in insecure employment, with zero-hour contracts, low pay and irregular shifts being the norm, and are significantly more likely to be in private rented accommodation, which has seen prices soar over the last decade. And on top of all that, they have to attempt to stretch their budgets even further to cover their travel costs, which will only worsen and deepen young people's experiences of poverty and the cost of living crisis. What we need is decisive, bold action on expanding free bus travel. Under-22s and the older and disabled persons schemes should be seen as the start of the work rather than the end. We should be investing to expand the concessionary scheme for more people so that they can continue to access vital opportunities and not be left behind because they can't afford an extortionate bus ticket. Now, I also welcome the pilot project agreed as part of budget negotiations last year with the Greens and the SNP to introduce a bus fare cap in a region of Scotland. But we are just weeks away from the proposed start date, and to my knowledge, unless the Minister corrects me, there has been very little progress. So the Government really needs to follow through on its commitments. It's critical, Presiding Officer, that we see more bus services also being run in the public interest. It's clear that decades of deregulation have been catastrophic for bus services. So it is really galling to see a Conservative amendment in this debate extolling the benefits of competition. Absolutely. There are different ways that we can put the public interest at the heart of how bus services are commissioned and run in this country. And I'm delighted that Strathclyde Passenger Transport is moving down the road towards franchising. They should be supported by this government in every way possible to achieve that goal. But currently, the franchising decision-making process still raises concerns and needs to be simplified. Presiding Officer, I see other models too of direct control by councils, community bus companies being established, even a national park commissioning its own services. The future restored bus services run by the public, for the public, affordable, accessible, reliable. That's the vision of the Scottish Greens. We invite other parties in this chamber to join with us and make that happen.
Thank you, Ms Russell. Could you please move your motion?
I move the motion in my name.
Thank you very much. I now call on Minister Jim Fairley to speak to and to move Amendment 19632.3. Up to 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer, and I move the amendment in my name. I'd like to extend my thanks to Mark Ruskell for bringing this debate to the Chamber today. I welcome the opportunity to discuss the importance of local bus services and, in particular, to acknowledge in the Chamber the enormous success of the Under-22 free bus travel scheme introduced by this SNP government, with Graham Day delivering it as the Minister. Bus services play a vital role in delivering the First Minister's 4 priorities of eradicating child poverty, growing the economy, tackling the climate emergency and improving public services, Scotland's public services. This government is investing more than £2.6 billion in 2025 and 2026 to support public transport and to make our transport system available, affordable and accessible for all. Now, we have increased our funding for bus services and concessionary travel from £430 million in 2024 and 25 to almost £465 million this year. And we invest all of this because bus offers a more sustainable way to keep our country moving in a way which is accessible to many. The Scottish Transport statistics published earlier this year showed that around 334 million passenger journeys were made by bus in Scotland in 2023-24, and that is an increase of 13% on the 2022-23, which shows good progress. 1 second. Across Scotland, over 2 million children, young people and disabled and older people are now benefiting from free bus travel, making over 3 million journeys per week. And since January 2022, over 250 million bus journeys have been made across Scotland by children and young people using their under-22 free bus travel entitlement card, helping them and their families cut costs for essential and leisure travel. And that is an incredible achievement, and its benefits are so important to Scotland's young people. And I'll take the intervention from
Craig Hoy.
Will Mr Fairley elaborate on the point that I made to Mr Ruskell, which is that one of the consequences of the expansion of concessionary travel is that the budget is therefore very constrained for supported services, particularly in rural areas? And will the Government now look at potentially creating a rural bus fund for areas such as Dumfriesshire, which are rapidly becoming bus deserts?
Minister.
I'll come on to the point that the member makes later in my speech. Whilst supportive of the Green Party motion we are debating today, it's important that any expansion of the free bus travel in the future to more young people, and indeed to others, must be affordable and sustainable. The cost of free bus pass for the under-22s is currently sitting at £200.5 million, and we estimate costs of a further £100 million per year to extend the free travel to young people under the age of 26. Now, this financial year, we will also progress a national pilot to extend the free bus travel to people seeking asylum, as well as establishing a pilot scheme for a £2 bus fare cap in one of Scotland's transport regions, backed by a £3 million fund. I also recently announced £20 million through our Transformative Bus Infrastructure Fund. Now, that investment supports the development and construction of a wide range of infrastructure projects across Scotland, from bus lanes and bus priority signals to accessible features and transport hubs. And these improvements are designed to shorten journey times, increase reliability and improve integration with other modes of transport, ultimately encouraging more people to choose the bus over private vehicles. And to help local transport authorities improve bus provision in their areas, the Transport Scotland Act 2019 has now delivered the powers for local authorities and regional transport partnerships to take forward partnership working, franchising and local authority-run services alongside the existing ability to subsidise services. So it's important to remember that it's the decision for each authority to determine which, if any, of these powers that we've introduced will best address the transport challenges of their own area. The vast majority of passengers travel by bus travel safely and responsibly, including people of all ages using their free bus entitlement to travel. None of this would be possible without the bus drivers keeping communities connected. However, there is a minority of people of all ages who act in a way which can result in harm to bus employees and to passengers, and that is simply not acceptable. Antisocial behaviour in the bus network is something we are determined to address. The programme for Government prioritised consideration of suspending the use of concessionary travel cards on a temporary and potentially permanent basis as a result of antisocial behaviour when using the card. Detailed work is progressing on a behaviour code, robust impact assessments and a process for suspension, with enabling secondary legislation due to be laid in Parliament on the 4th of December of this year. It is simply not acceptable for drivers or passengers to have to put up with antisocial behaviour, and this should send a clear message to the small minority that action will be taken and they will lose that privilege if they continue to use that antisocial behaviour. Deputy Presiding Officer, I look forward to hearing...
Minister is about to conclude.
I look forward to hearing members' contributions this afternoon, and it is clear that growing bus patronage and reflecting local circumstances in decision-making all contribute significantly in delivering improved bus services.
Thank you, Minister. I'll now move on to call Sue Webber. We have no time in hand. I call Sue Webber to speak to and to move Amendment 19632.2. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I move the amendment in my name. So let's begin by thanking... I think we can all agree upon the importance of better bus services across Scotland. And communities across Scotland do deserve affordable, accessible and reliable bus services because, after all, they are a vital lifeline for so many. Because not only can it help the economy to prosper, but they play a key role in Scotland's social development, linking people to work, education, healthcare and leisure, while offering a real alternative to car travel. But our transport network has been run into the ground under the SNP, with vital road upgrades being delayed, an ageing ferry fleet that needs overdue vessels and passengers experiencing poorer services. Public transport has become unreliable and far too expensive. Taxpayer subsidies, ticket prices and complaints have all soared, while the number of services and passengers using them have plummeted with them. And we disagree with the Scottish Greens idea that more buses should be run in the public interest. This vague statement means nothing. The public sector is not automatically the most effective operator. Competition, accountability and efficiency delivers better services. Competition keeps fares fair and reasonable, and it drives operators to deliver punctual, clean and customer-focused services. First Bus have been keen to reiterate that by stating, "We believe that voluntary, legal, binding partnerships provide the best value to taxpayers and customers, and they are an award-winning bus company." Better buses also require proper infrastructure and joined-up thinking. Buses can't run to time if our roads are in disrepair or face disruption, lengthy diversions due to poorly coordinated roadworks and resulting traffic jams. The Confederation of Passenger Transport Scotland is really keen to see faster, greener and safer bus and coach journeys. Their top priority is to address traffic congestion and improve journey times for the 900,000 trips made by buses every day in Scotland. The average bus in Scotland travels at 11.3 miles per hour. And yes, I'll take the intervention.
Briefly, Minister.
Would the member recognise and rejoice with the fact that not only myself and the Cabinet Secretary, we had a round table with the Roadworks Commissioner, we had a round table with bus operators, and they are very clear that we are clearly getting towards a position where we will make accessibility of buses and the timescales of buses work better.
The member's got enough to respond.
Would I get some time back, perhaps?
Very brief time back.
Okay. That's fantastic that you've had the opportunity to meet with the Roadworks Commissioner. I have tried on several occasions, but I have yet to be able to garnish that meeting. Another real opportunity lies in better integration between our different transport modes. Currently, bus and rail timetables are poorly aligned, and ticketing systems do not work across different modes of transport or across operators. I really want to be focusing on the practical measures such as smart ticketing, allowing passengers to travel seamlessly between bus, rail and even ferry. Single ticketing and fare caps across modes, as well as synchronising timetables, makes changing trips on the different modes of transport far more easily. Technology already exists to facilitate this, and I'm at a loss as to why it's not been prioritised and put at the top of the list of things to do. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. And we've heard, and I'm really pleased to hear of in the comments from the Minister regarding the legislation that's going to be laid before Parliament on the 4th of December, because there is a growing problem of antisocial behaviour on our buses. Drivers, passengers and young people themselves deserve to feel safe. And I will be very, very looking forward to that statement, because the consequences for those who engage in that persistent abusive behaviour towards bus drivers and passengers must be addressed. The Scottish Government does receive more money per capita for public services than the rest of the UK, and it's high time that the SNP showed some common sense. Use that money to give the public the vital services they deserve across Scotland. They deserve a transport network that delivers for road users and provides value for money and reliability for passengers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Webber. I now call on Claire Baker to speak to and move Amendment 19632.1. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. So I think we all agree that buses are the backbone of Scotland's public transport system. Whether it's getting to work, to school, to hospital appointments or visiting family and friends, for many people buses are not just a convenience, they are a necessity. Yet too often people are left behind by a system that simply isn't working. Across Scotland, communities have seen routes cut, services reduced and fares increase. In too many rural and semi-rural areas, buses have become unreliable or disappeared altogether. Local bus services have collapsed under the SNP since they came to power, with over 1,400 routes gone and 1,700 buses have been lost from Scotland's fleet. Too many people living on low incomes are priced off of bus services, which limits their ability to access opportunities to work. The consequences are social isolation for individuals who rely on these services and decline for local economies. Poor services also prevent people from making the switch to public transport that is vital towards meeting our climate targets. It is clear that our current system is not working in the public interest. Local authorities should be able to use the powers and have the resources to take back control of local bus services, where that is what communities need. We want a model that puts passengers first and that sees buses that are run for the public good. Progress on change is glacial. The current franchising process is far too complex and slow. It creates barriers that prevent councils from stepping in when private companies withdraw or fail to deliver. We need to shorten and simplify the franchising process so local government can act quickly and effectively. It is about giving councils the tools they need to deliver reliable, affordable and joined-up public transport networks. We can look elsewhere in the UK for examples of how this can work. In Greater Manchester, the move to publicly controlled buses under the B network has already delivered lower fares, integrated ticketing and rising passenger satisfaction. There is no reason why communities in Fife, Stirling or Dundee should not be able to see the same benefits. If we are serious about rebuilding our bus network, we must also think about where the buses come from. Scotland has the skills, the workforce and the industrial heritage to build clean, modern buses of the future. Yet too often, contracts have gone overseas where they could have supported jobs here at home. The Scottish Government needs to prioritise domestic bus manufacturing, supporting good, skilled jobs that already exist and creating new ones in supply chains, apprenticeships and innovation. This is how we ensure the transition to the net zero transport delivers benefits across the Scottish economy. The free bus travel scheme for under 22s has helped a generation of young people access opportunities and participate more fully in society. This is something that we should all celebrate. But we must also make sure that there is a reliable service for them to travel on, because free travel means little if the bus never comes, as other members have highlighted. Presiding Officer, it is now over a year since the Parliament supported the Labour motion on addressing abuse of bus drivers and its call for the ability to remove bus passes from individuals of any age, and I would say any age, repeatedly carrying out antisocial behaviour. And I am pleased to hear from the Minister this afternoon that we have a date of the 4th of December for the Government intend to bring forward regulations that would make some progress on this. And that would be part of ensuring that buses are safe places to be for drivers and for passengers. And as part of that, it might be also helpful if we think back to the report that was prepared under Jenny Gilruth about women on public transport, if at the same time we could have an update on the work around that, which covered buses as well as trains. So our amendment today is about action, not just aspiration. It's about giving local government real power, backing Scottish industry and ensuring that bus services truly operate in the public interest. Scottish Labour has long argued for a people-centred approach to transport policy. We want public transport that connects communities, supports local economies and tackles climate change. Affordable, reliable, safe and accessible bus services are at the heart of that vision, and I move the amendment in my name.
Thank you, Ms Baker. And I now call on Jamie Green to open on behalf of the Scottish Liberal Democrats. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I remember sitting at the back of a school bus trip singing that famous school bus trip song. Not the one about the ejection of one's grandmother from said vehicle, the other one, where its wheels go round and round. The problem is, 30 years later, for many communities in our country, the wheels are going nowhere instead, because over the last 2 decades, we've lost 40% of our registered bus routes. In 2023-2024, Transport Scotland recorded 334 million passenger journeys. And to be fair, that was a recovery from the pandemic lows, but it's still way below the 425 million journeys that was recorded just a decade earlier. This is a story of long-term decline of a hollowed-out bus network, which most people, I'm afraid, find patchy, expensive and unreliable. In my region alone, bus travel has fallen by a third. That's 70... I wish I had time, I don't, I'm sorry. That's fallen by 70 million fewer journeys just in the West region, which probably explains why the M8 is a car park most of the time. But all the while, of course, fares have risen by 16% over that period. The Scottish Government say, of course, they want to get people out of their cars and onto public transport. Well, that's great. But in what way does removing your lifeline bus service encourage people out of their cars? And the reality is, it is our rural and island communities who have been let down the most by this travesty. The Scottish Government has spent a lot of money on buses. Of course, it's subsidised concessionary fares and services by nearly £1.3 billion over the last 3 years alone. Public investment for the public good, right? But the fault of the current system is it leaves all the power to private operators to just pick and choose the routes that it wants to run, whilst demanding subsidies for the ones which make them no profit. The model is simply broken, I think. Now, back in 2019, the Transport Bill, which I remember sitting on the committee passing it, gave councils powers to create and operate local bus services under a new franchising model. But 6 years on, not a single franchise has been delivered under this model. Why? Because clearly the capital and resource needed to deliver such a franchise just does not exist. I said all that at the time, of course, when the bill passed. Councils were given all of the power, but none of the resource. And as has already been pointed out, when you get this right, it actually works. Greater Manchester has seen 7 million more bus journeys, 24-hour routes. Can you imagine a 24-hour bus service in some communities? All because it restructures its franchising model and remodelled its ticketing system. Again, I tried to amend that 2019 bill with a smart ticketing amendment. The government, unsurprisingly, rejected it. You know, some 6 years later, I don't think it's beyond the wit of ministers or Transport Scotland to come up with some real long-term solutions to these long-term problems. Declining bus routes, rising costs and falling passenger numbers. If the government is really serious about this local authority franchising model, then it needs to be backed up with resource and, I'm afraid, money. Multi-year funding settlements to councils will let them make multi-year investment and spending decisions, because every pound invested in our local bus services delivers up to £4.50 in wider economic and social benefits. But of course, in return for public subsidy, I want to see operators meeting clear benchmarks for reliability, punctuality and, of course, accessibility. I think travellers just want us to get this right. Buses that come on time, tickets they can afford and routes that actually connect. The current model is unsustainable to the public purse, bad for commuters, and which sees a small select few operators make the most of the profit. I will support all the amendments today because they all have something valid to say, but isn't it about time we all sat down round the table and come up with some solutions? Surely the travelling public deserve that.
Thank you, Mr Green. We will now turn to the open debate. I would advise members there's no time in hand. Any interventions must be absorbed within the agreed speaking time, which members will know is up to 4 minutes. With that, I call Ariane Burgess to be followed by Jamie Hepburn. Ms Burgess.
Presiding Officer, when it comes to buses, the Scottish Greens deliver. By granting under-22s free bus travel, we've seen hundreds of thousands more young people using Scotland's networks, saving them money, making the most of the opportunities in their local areas and beyond, and reducing their climate impact. But there is still so much more to do to improve bus travel, and of vital importance is the provision of reliable and joined-up rural and island bus services, ensuring that no community is cut off from the network and that everyone can choose public transport. I've seen superb work by communities to create their own bus services. The Findhorn Development Trust in Murray runs a service taking people between rural areas to Forres. And this not only meets local people's needs, it also provides a social aspect, connecting people as they meet each other on the bus. And in Badenoch and Strathspey Community Connections, based in Aviemore, goes even further. I joined them on a shopping day where they brought people from all around the Strath to the local shops, and their service users enthusiastically told me that they'd been on a picnic outing to Loch Morlich the day before. So not only are they taking people to events, they're also organising their own opportunities for social interaction with buses as the basis. These examples demonstrate that when buses are community run, they're more than just transport. They build community and place. While it's great to see these communities coming together like this, it cannot and should not be left up to motivated volunteers to run critical public infrastructure. The Scottish Government has a responsibility to play its part to deliver buses for rural communities. In its new climate change plan, it lists free buses. Apologies, Minister, I don't have time. It lists free buses for under-22s and over 60s as a key method of cutting transport emissions, but it makes no commitment to go any further. And this isn't good enough. What we need is a government commitment to provide reliable services, especially in rural areas. Because if buses aren't turning up, people can't get on. Private operators have shown time and again that they can't be trusted to deliver reliable rural bus networks. Services are withdrawn at short notice, fares rise well above inflation every year, and timetables are all but meaningless, and I can say that from personal experience. Now, this makes it hard for people to leave their car at home and opt for the bus to commute to work or to an appointment. The only way we can resolve this is to bring buses back into public hands. As has been shown by Lothian Buses, doing so can actually drive revenue for local authorities, and at the same time as delivering better services for local people. We're starting to see rural councils take this opportunity as well. Borders Council has seen a 70% increase in bus passengers taking services in-house. It shows what Highland Council can expect now that it has taken 17 routes back into public ownership. We also need to think about how we deliver better transport for islanders. And it's great that under-22s can go for free on the Inter-Isle ferries in Orkney and Shetland now. But these communities face what the government acknowledges are significantly higher transport costs compared to folk living in urban areas. In Shetland, the Scottish Greens are proposing a 2-year free bus pilot for all Shetlanders, and such a move would address the inequality faced by islanders whilst providing a boost to their economies, and it would give us a robust pilot to understand the impact of free bus travel. This is the kind of thinking that we need from the Scottish Government, and the Scottish Greens stand ready to work with them to build on what we've already achieved and deliver even fairer, more sustainable travel for all.
Thank you, Ms Burgess. I call Jamie Hepburn to be followed by Brian Whittle. Mr Hepburn.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Can I thank Mark Ruskell and the Greens for bringing forward the debate today. I'm going to make a short contribution to this debate. At the outset, I should say recognise the fundamental importance of bus as a mode of transport, as a social and economic lifeline for many, including many in my own constituencies. I recognise, as has been mentioned, as is referred to in the Labour amendment, they have seen a decline in the number of bus services, bus routes over the last period. That is undeniably true. I've seen it in my own area. I've had cause to raise that with relevant parties, and if time allows, I'll come back to that point. But in the context of the challenges that the bus sector faces, it is important that we do all we can. Clearly, the concessionary travel scheme has been important in supporting individuals, but it's also been important in supporting the bus sector as an important contribution to trying to help sustain the sector. But turning back to the individual benefit, we've seen over a very long period of time the benefits to those over the age of 60, those with eligible conditions with a disability, being able to access that service, being able to remain mobile and active in social and economic terms. And I would absolutely agree, readily agree, that the expansion of eligibility to under 22-year-olds has been a significant success. Over 250 million journeys. It speaks to that as a success story. I should declare, just as Mark Ruskell did, I don't think I need to declare it as an interest, but I declare that I have 2 young people at home who qualify for that under the terms of eligibility too. Looking at it with a local lens, a little wider than my own household, but still with a local lens, it has been enormously supportive to many young people in my constituency in light of a decision by North Lanarkshire Council to end school transport entitlement for a great number of young people in my area. I absolutely recognise and think it is important to say that the concessionary scheme itself should not be used to supplement or replace any removal of bus travel. And as an aside, the SNP group of councillors identified funding to continue school buses, but the Labour and Conservative councillors still voted those cuts through. But it is the case, nonetheless, that young people travelling to and from school have been able to use their entitlement to be able to access school. Also, other young people, and I very much take the point that Mark Ruskell made, that young people are less likely to have disposable income. So those young people just left school at the outset of their working lives, perhaps, with an apprenticeship or continuing to their education. I spoke with a constituent who told me her daughter utilised under 22 transport to get to and from university in Glasgow each and every day, and how essential that was. So we know it's an essential support for many young people. Indeed, it's welcome that over 80% of eligible young people are now accessing the scheme through a national entitlement card or Young Scot national entitlement card, and that the Child Poverty Action Group say that it could save a child in Scotland up to £2,836 annually. So it has a significant impact, and we should be doing everything we can to try and nudge that 80% closer to 100%. So we should be open to further expansion of the scheme. Mark Ruskell again makes a reasonable case, but I do think we do need to be cognizant of the circumstances we find ourselves in. The amendment in the name of the Minister makes clear it already costs £200.5 million. We're about to head into a budget process where we're hearing, of course it's not confirmed yet, but we're hearing that some changes being made to tax through the UK government could lead to a £1 billion cut to our own budget. That's the reality. In that sense, I think we need to accept the case, but look at it on a realistic basis, and I'll be supporting the amendment in the name of the Minister.
Thank you, Mr Hepburn. I call Brian Whittle to be followed by Paul McNeill. Mr Whittle.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer, and I am pleased to have the opportunity to speak in this debate today. Public transport is one of the most important issues to my constituents, and bus services are the most common source of complaint or concern, especially in rural areas. Now, in what I imagine will be much of a shock to them, as it was to me, Deputy Presiding Officer, I actually find points of agreement with the Scottish Greens motion on this issue. They are quite correct that communities across Scotland deserve affordable, accessible and reliable bus services. Now, unfortunately, at that point, our views diverge as they return to their safe space of demanding more free stuff, paid for ever-rising government spending, funded by ever higher taxes on Scots. While I believe the solutions lie in supporting the market to operate more effectively, and that if Scotland is going to offer young people the privilege of unlimited free bus travel at the taxpayer's expense, there should be serious consequences for abusing that privilege. And I await the Scottish Government laying legislation on this matter with interest. You see, Deputy Presiding Officer, this motion is a classic example of how the Scottish Greens approach policy. Call for lots of nice-sounding stuff and leave the practicalities to somebody else. Take free bus travel for under-22s, which they are now saying should be expanded. And in principle, there's a lot to like. Giving young people the opportunity to travel to and from educational work or visit more distant friends and family without the cost of bus fare is not a bad idea. But it comes with a cost, not only in the troubling increase in antisocial behaviour both on buses and in bus stations, but also the other improvements to services which aren't made because funds are being directed to subsidise free bus travel. Every policy comes with a trade-off, Deputy Presiding Officer. But it seems to me that we're sacrificing funding support for the basic to support and expand giveaways like free bus travel. Far too often in recent years, I've dealt with reports of antisocial behaviour by young people deterring other bus users from travelling. In Kilmarnock, antisocial behaviour in and around the bus station by young people, many travelling from outside of the town, has been such an issue that it has required ongoing interventions by Police Scotland and East Ayrshire Council. Time and again, I hear from constituents who feel unsafe using the bus station and avoid it after dark. Not easy for anyone who commutes to and from work in the winter months. Of course, antisocial behaviour isn't the only issue with the bus services today. While we often talk of public transport as though it's a single entity, a brief look at the bus and train timetables would tell you that that isn't the case. Not to mention the lack of joined-up infrastructure more generally. We know that the provision of good public transport infrastructure doesn't just encourage people out of their cars, it actually improves public health as people choose to walk or cycle to and from the bus stop. And yet we continue to see this inconsistent approach in ensuring key public transport facilities and routes align with each other. I'm sorry, I don't have anything. I would love to extend this debate. Deputy Presiding Officer, while the Scottish Greens continue to peddle ideological fantasies as the solution to the challenges facing Scotland's bus services, on these benches we prefer to deal with reality. Private sector providers aren't the enemy of good bus services, they're an essential part of it. When they can run a bus service profitably, they should do so. Where they can't, the Scottish Government believes such a service is necessary, as it is in many of my rural areas, then the money should be found to support those services, recognising the economic and social benefits that good public transport links can bring. Once passengers across Scotland have a bus service they can rely on, one that's clean and safe and punctual, then and only then should we be talking about spending more public money on ever more expensive freebies. Deputy Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Mr Whittle. I call Polly McNeill to be followed by Emma Roddick. Ms McNeill.
The bus remains by far the most commonly used form of public transport in Scotland, and most people who commute to work in public transport take the bus. But with routes being cut, prices rising, hitting people during the cost of living crisis, action is urgently needed to prevent people being priced out of travel and communities being cut off. Buses are vital for those on low incomes and those who needed to access their employment, their leisure and their everyday lives. Lower bus fares are an aspiration which I share. An NUS Scotland report on the cost of survival in 2023 found that over a fifth had missed a class due to travel costs. And of course, it's students from low-income families that are most affected. Local bus services in Scotland have collapsed by 44% since the SNP took over in 2007, and over 1,400 bus routes have been lost between 2007 and 2024. And in 1 year, 23-24 alone, we lost 190 bus routes. They've all been familiar with cuts to local services in our communities. I have and still do support public control and the regulation of the bus industry. I believe it is imperative that we do shorten and simplify the franchising process to enable local authorities to bring bus services under public control. In the years of my life where I've watched an unregulated private bus industry, I do not think that has served the people all that well. In Glasgow, taking the bus remains more expensive than taking the subway, believe it or not, with a return ticket costing nearly £6. And I think there's a lot to be learned from other cities, as Claire Baker talked about. Manchester and Edinburgh has a very popular bus service, with residents reflecting in the usage a confidence in their bus service, and it's certainly cheaper than Glasgow. But for me, the debate is about the affordability to customers, the reliability and, in fact, equivalency to other public sector, such as rail, for example. I mean, that's an aspiration that I know the bus industry has, that if you go into a railway station, you can see the timetable, you can see if the train is late. It should be the same if you're waiting on a bus. And if we don't aspire to that level of service, then I think they will maybe not understand why many people still won't use the bus. So the reliability, if you take Glasgow, the city that I represent, there's a recent case of an 18-year-old girl who was waiting on a night bus. It was the second last bus home. The number 57 didn't turn up. But the app that she should have been able to look at didn't show her where the bus was. The second bus was cancelled. On questioning the bus company about this, it was clear that roadworks played a big part in the delay in the bus. But they did accept that really that's not where we want to be when it comes to the reliability of buses, cancelling services. And of course, my concern for a young constituent, a young female constituent, is that if you can't afford to get a taxi home, then really it's something in 2025 we really shouldn't be having to hear. And the issue of women's safety, I think, is really important. In fact, my first term back here in 2016, I did work in a member's bill. I've always believed in concessionary fares. I've always believed that we've got to reduce fares, not just in buses. I believe it's important to make it affordable on trains too. And the bill that I looked at, because this cliff edge that Mark Ruskell talks about, that cliff edge happens to 16-year-olds when they turn 16 to pay full fares on the trains as well. It may be something to look at for a future Parliament. So, for me, I think it is about affordability, reliability and concessionary fares. I want to conclude by saying, Presiding Officer, I do want to commend the bus industry for the progress that they have made, particularly in relation to decarbonisation of vehicles. Concessionary schemes are very, very important and we support them. We did it ourselves when we were in government, but we must aspire to better bus services for our communities, taking people to the places that they need to be.
Thank you, Ms McNeill. And I call Emma Roddick. Ms Roddick.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm delighted to contribute to the debate today and agree that communities across Scotland deserve affordable, accessible and reliable bus services. I was surprised by the government amendment today. I do recognise the cost of delivering the concessionary travel card, a card that I have personally benefited from hugely in the past, getting to work at the hospital, being able to get to town to meet with friends or to volunteer in the middle of Inverness. But that £200.5 million investment is an investment with tangible returns. It is helping young people hold up jobs, helping them travel to caring responsibilities, to further in higher education, to voluntary roles, to the social opportunities that will support their health and well-being moving forward. Since the introduction of the free bus travel scheme for under-22s, children and young people have made over 250 million free bus journeys. That is at least 250 million opportunities opened up. It's 250 million steps taken to relieve financial pressure on families, and it is 250 million steps towards tackling the climate crisis, encouraging a new generation to choose sustainable travel early on in their lives. So perhaps the Minister can clarify the wording in the statement in his summing up. Yes, I will.
Claire Baker.
Would the member agree with me that it would be helpful for some work to be done on what happens when young people turn 22 and whether the commitment to public transport still continues?
Emma Roddick.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are probably cases to be made for lots of different groups being able to access cheaper or free bus or other transport services. And I hope that that work goes on to make those assessments of where the best value is going to come for society, for individuals, in any future expansion of the concessionary scheme. Because a strong, accessible bus service is a powerful engine for driving forward all the key priorities of this government: eradicating child poverty, growing a fair economy, tackling the climate emergency and improving public services. In the Highlands and Islands, I see that every day in communities spread across vast geography, from the islands to villages in Sutherland. Buses are an absolute lifeline. In Inverness, I think of the huge reliance on services like Stagecoaches Number 3, connecting communities like mine in Merkinch and the Carse to the city centre, Regmore, Inverness College and up to Culloden. When that service suffers cancellations through weather or breakdowns or staffing issues, I hear about it. It has impact on the ladies stuck in the rain on Keswick Road trying to get to Harry-Gowes or staying on to head to Regmore Hospital, the group heading to Simpson's Garden Centre and the MSP trying to make her train. For many of my constituents, students, workers, older people, that bus is the difference between full participation and isolation. But when we rely on commercial operators to deliver these vital services, the continuity of them is always at the whim of profits, leaving our rural or less well-off communities first and most vulnerable to cancellation and cuts. I share concerns mentioned around not being able to use their card if there is no bus. That is a situation that many young people I represent are in, and it's why I spent years campaigning for an expansion of the scheme to cover inter-island ferries, which I'm very glad is now in use. But I think the justification for services comes with usage, which comes with constant improvement and expansion of services, and I'm confident that the direction that we are on is the right one. This scheme is now recognised across the UK as a benchmark. We are seeing reports from Westminster committees encouraging the UK Labour government to copy the SNP's policy down south, where fares are rising faster than inflation and costs are said to be acting as a barrier to opportunity. So while the Scottish Government is delivering on available bus powers, including empowering local transport authorities to consider options like franchising through the Transport Act 2019, which has since resulted in some excellent services being taken forward by the Highland Council, we must acknowledge the constraints on our ambition, because the hard reality is there is a ceiling on what devolution can achieve. We cannot secure the full fiscal powers needed to ensure all essential bus services, from the busiest routes in Inverness to the single crucial once-a-day lifelines to Durness, are protected, publicly focused and permanently
Ms Roddick, you need to close. Thank you. We move to closing speeches. I call on Neil Bibby to close on behalf of Scottish Labour. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I thank Mark Ruskell for bringing forward this debate. As my colleague Claire Baker said in opening, Scottish Labour believes we need a public transport system in Scotland that is affordable, reliable, accessible and safe for all. And that's one of the reasons why the former Scottish Labour Government introduced free bus travel for over 60s back in 2006, and why we called for and supported the rollout of free bus travel for young people. That has been positive, and members have talked about the positive gains from that. However, I do think we also need to recognise that it has also presented challenges. And whilst the vast majority of children and young people are a credit to their community, there is a very small minority of bus users who have used buses as gang huts and to commit antisocial behaviour towards bus drivers and other passengers, and that is unacceptable. As Claire Baker said earlier, it's over a year since Parliament supported a Scottish Labour motion calling for the removal of bus passes from individuals of any age who repeatedly carry out antisocial behaviour, and I join Claire Baker in welcoming what the Minister said about his plans to ensure buses are safe places for bus drivers and passengers. And in addition to that, I think Claire Baker and Pauline McNeill both raised the Women and Girls Safety Report on public transport, and I think we particularly need an update on that too. Well, we welcome the provision of free bus passes for, I think it was over 2 million people, Presiding Officer. There are, of course, 3 million people of working age in Scotland between the ages of 22 and 60 who don't qualify for free bus travel. Nothing in life is free, and working age people are paying for free buses, as others enjoy, but at the same time are in some parts of Scotland, in fact, paying amongst the highest bus fares in the UK. For example, in my own region in Renfrewshire, it can cost my constituents £3.10 just to make a 2-mile single journey. And I know the government's taken action in relation to off-peak rail fares. We've talked about pilots, but I actually think we don't need pilots. What we need is price regulation of bus services in Scotland. And unfortunately, over the last 18 years, we haven't had any meaningful regulation of the bus system in Scotland, let alone price regulation. And there has been next to nothing done to stop private bus companies dictating our bus services and putting profits before people. Meanwhile, as we've heard, local people have seen their bus services cut, with a staggering 1,400 bus routes being lost between 2007 and 2024. I've got constituents in places like Whitehall, Hunter Hill, Glenburn and Gallaghill and Paisley are just a few of those who have been affected. And it is no surprise, as many people have said, that bus passenger numbers have subsequently plummeted by nearly a third since the SNP came to power. And no wonder also why my constituents are regularly asking what is the point in a free bus pass if there is no bus to get on. So what we need is a concrete plan to ensure enough buses actually exist for those with an existing free bus pass to use and for all bus passengers to use, and to bring local buses under local control. Bus franchising powers were passed by this Parliament 6 years ago to allow this to happen, but to date little has changed. I am pleased, as has been mentioned previously, that the Strathclyde Partnership for Transport are progressing plans for franchising in the Greater Glasgow area after consultation showed overwhelming support from the travelling public. But as it also been said, they do need support from this Scottish Government to carry that forward and allow them to take this forward. And I'm not how committed the Scottish Government and the Minister is to bus franchising. I know the Minister said it's for authorities to decide. What we would like to hear from the Scottish Government is a commitment from the Scottish Government. We support franchising, we support local buses being taken under local control, because that's the leadership we've had in Manchester under Andy Burnham, it's the leadership we've had in Leeds under the Mayor there and in Liverpool. And if it's good enough for those areas, then surely it's good enough for areas like Greater Glasgow and other parts
Mr Bibby,
of
could you
Scotland.
please conclude?
I'll leave that there, Presiding Officer. We want to ensure our public transport is safe, accessible, affordable for all.
Thank you, Mr Bibby. I now call on Craig Coy to close on behalf of Scottish Conservatives. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Officer, if I could just put a slight dose of realism in today's debate, is that everything we discuss in here is about priorities and choices. And I recently sat on a panel organised by the Royal Society of Edinburgh in Dumfries, at which Ross Greer spoke. And I'm not sure if this is a confirmed SNP Green policy or not, but he said that he would hope that the Green Party could offer free bus travel to everyone in Scotland. Now, that may sound like a very noble outcome, but it would come at a huge cost. And I think this is the point I would make to the Minister as the Government considers expanding concessionary travel, is that we are seeing in certain areas of Scotland, Dumfriesshire in particular over the course of the summer, where we almost saw the entire collapse of the bus network. I will give way to Patrick Harvey.
Patrick Harvey.
I'm grateful to the member for giving way. When he thinks about the cost of providing a policy like free bus travel, could he compare it, for example, to the extraordinary cost of the government's road building programme, which the Conservatives constantly tell us they're not spending enough money on and they're not doing fast enough?
Craig Coy.
I think it shows the depth of the failure to engage in joined-up thinking that Patrick Harvey doesn't realise that buses run on roads. And if you come to Dumfriesshire and look at the state of the roads, you will see a bus service that has been denuded of investment and a road network that has been denuded of investment under this SNP government. So I think we have to make sure, if we are having a discussion around this, and for Patrick Harvey and Ross Greer, for example, to say all of this could be funded by a wealth tax, well, I suspect the last few millionaires areas in Scotland would be on a bus over the border if the Greens were ever to get closer to power in Scotland. Can I welcome what the Government has announced today in respect of the under-22s bus travel and antisocial behaviour? Yeah. But can I put a practical point? But can I put a practical point to them, which is that
from secondary positions, please, Mr. White, please continue.
If the scheme is to be adapted to allow the bus pass to be removed, can you give some thought to how that will work in practice? Because having spoken to bus unions, if they are effectively saying there are 13 or 14 kids that are about to board the bus and one does not have a bus pass, are they really prepared to single out that child with the ramifications of increased antisocial behaviour that may result in? So ministers will have to think that through, and it may well be that they will have to have slightly more draconian measures put in place to address that issue. It was a debate where I think we got to the heart of some of these issues, but my real concern, and something I just want to close on really, is the issue of rural bus services, because any expansion in concessionary travel is going to result in scarce resources, probably going into central belt areas where we've now got this concept of 15-minute neighbourhoods and people who want 4 buses an hour. Let me tell you, there are some parts of the south of Scotland that I represent that simply want a bus service each day, and it would be impossible for them to live in a 15-minute neighbourhood. Can I also just ask the Minister to focus on one final thing, which is for those supported services in rural areas that are being cut, where councils simply can no longer afford them, those are lifeline services that are being cut. Now, we've been looking at the issue of bank closures, but before the last bank in town can close, there has to be an assessment about cash access. I think we need something similar in the bus system, because we cannot have communities in parts of Scotland that have no bus travel whatsoever. And it's fundamentally unfair that these people are paying their taxes, they may be getting a bus pass, but there is no bus for them to use. The ministers must think about this before they expand the concession travel programme.
Thank you, Mr Hoy. And I call on Minister Jim Fairley to close on behalf of the Scottish Government. Up to 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. And I'd like to thank all the members for the debate today. I think it's actually been a good debate, and the contributions have, by and large, been very positive. And it's talking about the importance of bus, but also the challenges that we are facing. But I also want to point out how we are tackling some of those challenges. Various people, I'm not going to name everybody, various people talked about the things that are needing to be in place. The Bus Infrastructure Fund is helping tackle the challenges of reliable timetables. I've seen fantastic work in Glasgow with the AI technology that's working in there. The Network Support Grant is helping rural communities. Plugged-in communities also helping rural communities to create that community bus system. I've said that the negativity did come from Sue Webber, constantly running Scotland down. It must be a really miserable place that the Tories come from, when everything that we talk about, not just in bus, but across everything that's happened in Scotland, it's always done in a negative way, and that's disappointing. However, I understand why they do it. There's a lot of work ongoing, as I said, the Roadworks Commissioners' meetings that we've brought forward in order to try to make sure that bus transport gets moving. I'll take Sue Webber's intervention.
Sue Webber.
Oops. Thank you, Presiding Officer. Minister, I'm never in a position where I totally run Scotland down. I was just making the real case that we have masses of inequality across our country in terms of bus service provision. I'm fortunate to live in Edinburgh, and other cities are well provided. We've heard from colleagues about Dumfries and all those rural areas who have nothing, and that is what I was trying to get through today.
Minister.
I'll take the member's point, but it was the Tories that actually dismantled the bus service in the first place. Jamie Green, on the other hand, he talked about things that are going on, and that's why we are giving RTPs powers in order to make sure that we can give local authorities the abilities to bring in those local services that they want to have. But I'm very happy to hear the fact that he wants to come forward and actually talk about what the solutions are, because we have got challenges. So I more than welcome that engagement with people who actually want to bring real solutions to the table to allow us to find what it is I think this chamber wants as a good quality, reliable public service. So I very much welcome that from Jamie Green. Ariane Burgess talked about rural communities not having, as well as Mr Hoy talking about rural communities not having enough bus services. That's why we've got the community bus funds. That's why we've got the plugged-in communities. It's why we've got demand-responsive transport. These are all things that are helping to give people the ability to be able to get bus, but we know there is more to do. So I accept the fact that, that we still have these things to work out. there has been a 13% increase in the number of bus journeys that have been made from 2022-23 into 2023-2024, which is a positive thing. That's a good thing. It's not as good as what it was prior to COVID, and we don't know quite how we're going to get that up yet, but we're going to continue to work on those things. Unfortunately, I couldn't hear the question that Emma Roddick put to me, but we are talking about the assessment of what happens post-2022, and we're looking at that. We're working out what's going to happen once people drop out of the age. How many of them continue to use the bus? And there's an opportunity there for bus companies to say, if these people are dropping out, how do we hold on to them? How do we keep them in the system? I'd also like to talk about the fact that she talked about the great work that Highland Council are doing, and they're doing some fantastic work, and that's to be commended. Jamie Hepburn talked about things that are happening in North Lanarkshire, and he's talking about the council cutting services. And I would make this point that councils really have to be cognizant of what the local community are telling them, because if they're saying that it's an unsafe walking route, then councils really need to listen to that, and I'm glad that Jamie Hepburn brought that point up. As we heard, the Under-22 bus travel scheme is transformation for the young people of Scotland, and I acknowledge the ask of the Scottish Green Party for the expansion to be considered as part of the upcoming opposition party negotiations in 2026 and 2027. But we must be mindful of what our budget is. Jamie Hepburn talked about the potential of a massive cut to Scotland's fiscal position later this year. And on the topic of public ownership of bus services, we have now delivered all the powers for our local transport authorities and regional transport partnerships to take forward whatever it is that they decide to run in their communities, and that is the way that we're going to go forward. So this has been a good debate. It's one that I think has given us the opportunity to talk as a chamber, and then if we can work together to make sure that we bring in the systems that allow us to improve our public services, I think that's a good thing. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Minister, and I call on Patrick Harvey to wind up.
Well, thank you, Presiding Officer, and thanks also to everyone who's contributed to this debate. It's clear that across the Chamber there's a strong recognition of the value and importance of bus services to all of the communities we represent, whether that's in tackling child poverty and the cost of living, access to services, to work, to college, access to each other, and I think in one member's speech, access to something as simple as picnics by the loch. Bus travel was described during the debate as the backbone of public transport, and I think that's right. I wanted to mention Jamie Green's speech because he was one of a number of members who talked about the reduction in bus services, especially in the more rural parts of his region. But he didn't simply blame the government for that. He recognised the model itself is broken. And he saw that the blame often lies with the private operators, that councils have been given the power to act but not the resource. And in too many parts of Scotland, we do see private companies quite happily running the profitable bits of the network, and some people thinking that's a good thing, while abandoning other parts of the network or other communities and leaving the public sector to step in. There are examples a number of members spoke about where communities themselves step in. And I'll because Davy Russell's in the chamber, I'll mention Straven Climate Action, who run the 3C in his constituency. That's how I got out there when we were all heading out there for the by-election campaign. But local communities shouldn't be having to step in to fill the gaps in a failed private sector model. Now, a number of members talked about antisocial behaviour and the impact of that. I believe, as we all do, that every bus passenger should be safe and feel safe using the bus. Every bus driver and worker in the bus services should be safe at work and should feel safe at work. So we recognise that this is an issue. But I also say it's not entirely tied to the under-22s free bus pass, and I regret that some people seem to want to tie those issues a little bit too closely. I've seen antisocial behaviour on the public transport network, including on trains, not just buses. And on buses, I've seen it from people who are significantly older than those young people who are sometimes stigmatised. And I know from colleagues that it happens in parts of England as well that don't have something equivalent to the under-22s free bus pass. Now, we'll obviously look at what the government comes forward, and we'll take a view on it when we see it if they want to make changes. But it is clear to me, at least, that simply removing the pass does not tackle antisocial behaviour. If somebody's behaviour is the problem, then simply saying that they should pay for their own ticket, that's not a solution. And saying that they shouldn't be on the bus just means that that behaviour will be happening somewhere else. So I would like us to be thinking about the behaviour principally there rather than the bus pass. Free bus has been an overwhelming success, and although there were one or two members who seem to be in denial about that, thinking of it as though it's some uncosted fantasy economics, I'll just gently remind everyone we have actually done it. It's happening, it's working, and it's been a huge success with over 250 million journeys taken. And I've spoken to constituents of mine who did have the option to take a job or to take a college course, which they simply couldn't have afforded to do if they've had to pay the full cost of their bus travel. And publicly funded journeys as well, whether that's for younger people, older people or anyone else, do help to make services more viable. They help to protect and preserve services that the private sector otherwise would be seeking to undermine. But this also makes the case in itself for moving away from what is a failed free market model. The Conservative amendment talks about competition. We've had decades of competition in delivering bus services and it has failed. Yep. We've seen ever-rising prices, services scrapped, unreliable and many communities left without a service altogether. And government does often get the blame for that. When communities are poorly served. What this in fact proves, though, is that free market model is a failure. We need to move on. Certainly to franchising, and yes, the argument for shortening that process and simplifying that process is very clear. We need to move on in terms of not just giving local authorities the ability to do it, we need to fund it. We need to make sure that they are resourced, that they have access to the funding and the skills that will enable them to use those powers. And from that case, for franchising, we then need to move on and talk about public ownership as well. This also will need resource, but it is going to be the most effective way to ensure that we end up with a public transport service that works for the public interest. Claire Baker, I think, I commend the bravery of using the phrase "take back control," because I wish, for goodness sake, that the phrase "take back control" had been coined as a slogan by those who weren't seeking to blame the European Union for all the ills of the country, but were looking to blame the private sector, the super rich and the billionaires. We have a bus service in this country that has allowed the super rich to line their own pockets by running rubbish services that are fleecing people at the ticket and not providing the service that's needed to a great many communities. Greens are proud of the progress that we've made, particularly on under-22s travel. We're determined to build on that progress and see a public transport system in Scotland that's run for public benefit and meets the interests of the communities we serve.
Thank you, Mr Harvey. That concludes the debate on better bus services. It's now time to move to the next item of business, which is consideration of business motion 19649 in the name of Graham Day on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau setting out a business programme. And I call on any member who wishes to speak to the motion to press the request to speak button now. I call on Minister Graham Day to move the motion.
Move, Presiding Officer.
Thank you. And I call Stephen Kerr.
Presiding Officer, two statements are urgently needed. One on Alexander Dennis Limited and another on the future of Grangemouth and Project Willow. Both are of national significance. They're not parochial concerns, but defining tests of whether this government can deliver a credible industrial strategy for Scotland. Of course, I've made prior requests, both to my business manager and directly to the Minister and to the Deputy First Minister for these ministerial statements. And I'm doing so again today in the Chamber because I feel that I owe it to my constituents and because time is not on our side. Let me start with Alexander Dennis. It's been almost 2 months since the government's £4 million intervention was announced, and it was described at a time as a bridge to a sustainable future. But a bridge to where? And for how long can it stand without solid progress beneath it? There's been no public update on how that intervention is working, what milestones have been set, or how the company's long-term future is being secured. We need answers on what discussions ministers have had with UK counterparts about procurement reform to ensure fair competition for British-built buses, We also need clarity on what has changed within Scotland's own procurement systems to ensure that local jobs, local suppliers and environmental benefits are properly valued. Without that, this so-called bridge is little more than a pause before decline. Scotland can't afford to lose its last major bus manufacturer or the highly skilled workforce at Falkirk and Larbert, whose livelihoods still hang in the balance. Now, turning to Grangemouth, Presiding Officer, the situation is equally pressing. The Grangemouth Industrial Cluster Strategy has been published, building on Project Willow, the Just Transition Plan and the Growth Deal. But words on a page will not sustain new jobs or new investment. We need delivery, and Parliament deserves a detailed update on investor engagement, on discussions with the current owners of the refinery site, the former refinery site, and how that will be used in the future, Petroineos, and how public funding, including the £25 million of the Just Transition Fund and the UK Government's promised £200 million from the National Wealth Fund, are being allocated and used, if they are at all. The people of Grangemouth deserve transparency and assurance that real opportunities are being created or in the process of being created for workers through retraining, re-employment and industrial renewal. Presiding Officer, both Alexander Dennis and Grangemouth are tests of this government's seriousness about sustaining our industrial base. They're about whether we still make things here, whether we still value skilled work and community prosperity. And that's why I'm again using this time tonight to urge the Government to bring forward full ministerial statements and updates on both issues as soon as practically possible. Parliament and the people that we serve deserve clear answers and visible progress, because, as ever, time is running out.
Thank you. And I call on the Minister to respond on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau.
Presiding Officer, there is a process in place in this institution to request statements, which is via the business managers of the relevant parties. Now, I will check later tonight, but I'm not aware of any current request on these topics that has been received from the Conservative Party, not through the formal processes. As I say, that is the process, not raising it in the chamber in this way. This government has shown itself willing, particularly in the case of my predecessor, Jamie Hepburn, to consider and often accede to appropriate statement requests. If Mr Kerr or any other member wishes to request statements on this or any other topic, as I said, there are proper processes to be followed, and if requests come via those channels, I'll give way in a second. The Government will, of course, give appropriate consideration to them. I give way to Mr Kerr.
Stephen Kerr.
I am aware of what the processes are, and I have followed them, both in terms of the party business management route and also in terms of directly soliciting a statement from the relevant minister and from the Minister for Parliamentary Business. I know that we like to think this Parliament is run by the parties, but I hope that the Minister would agree there is still a very important role for individual members of this Parliament to seek the opportunity to have issues that matter to their constituents raised by way of a statement or any other method or approach that is appropriate.
Minister.
Presiding Officer, if Mr Kerr wants to circumvent the process or the position of his business manager, that is a matter for him. But the proper way in which to take this forward is for the representative of the Conservative Party on the Bureau to raise with the Government, and that will be discussed and considered at the Bureau. I give way to Tim Eagle.
Tim Eagle.
Actually, I thank the Minister for giving way. I've just sent those emails across to you now, but you will obviously have had the previous...
wait. Colleagues, let's hear Mr Eagle. And Mr Eagle, through the Chair, please.
Just to back up Mr Kerr here, Mr Kerr has sent letters to the Minister on several occasions about these matters in the past, and the Minister won't be unaware of those. We have sent those statements, as we always do, but I absolutely concur with the member. Surely on matters as significant as this, which have a massive economic impact, huge infrastructure for our people, the member has the right to bring those to Parliament in any way they choose to do so. And I, as the business manager, have put those letters across tonight.
Thank you. Minister.
I welcome that clarity, Presiding Officer, which is that we did not have such requests. As I said a moment ago, we will give due consideration to any requests that are made to the Scottish Government on these matters. Presiding Officer.
Point of order, Stephen Kerr.
Well, members from the SNP are shouting, go away, go away. I think that's exactly what the SNP would like. They'd like every opposition MSP just to go away and let them have their playtime to themselves. Well, I was elected here, as we all were, to represent the interests of constituents, and I'm seeking, on a point of order from the presiding officer, is it or is it not in order for individual members of this Parliament, regardless of party or no party, to seek statements in this Parliament from ministers on matters that pertain to the welfare and interest of their constituents? Is it the case that I, as an individual member of this Parliament, have the right to do that?
It is the case that under standing orders, this particular item of business can be used for members to call on items of business that they wish to see in a future programme of the Parliament. Now, the question is that motion 19649 be agreed. Are we all agreed? We are agreed. Move on to the next item of business, which is consideration of 10 Parliamentary Bureau motions, and I ask Graham Day, on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau, to move motions 19650 to 19657 on approval of SSIs, 19658 on designation of a lead committee, and 19659 on committee substitute.
Move, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Minister. The question on these motions will be put at decision time. There are 9 questions to be put as a result of today's business. And can I remind members that if the amendment in the name of Richard Lochhead is agreed to, the amendment in the name of Douglas Lumsden and Sarah Boyack will fall. The first question is that Amendment 19637.4 in the name of Richard Lochhead, which seeks to amend motion 19637 in the name of Patrick Harvie on Rosebank, be agreed. Are we all agreed? The Parliament is not agreed, therefore we'll move to a vote, and there will be a short suspension to allow members to access the digital voting system.